You guys are on mute.
Russ, you are host again. We are on live. So can you make me co-host?
Thank you, Victor. Hi, Frank and Joanne. I hear you now.
Oh, okay. Hi, how are you?
Good. You're all. I've allowed sharing for you two, so you two can share your screen at the appropriate moment.
Right.
I'll have a little intro about you first, and then I will unshare my screen and allow you two to share your show again. And I think I mentioned we'll do it today so that we hold the questions in the chat till the end.
Oh, yeah. I had some questions in.
Yeah, Russ, I guess you understand I am not getting an email with the ISP to launch. Joanne gets them, I don't. When I registered, it said registered, but it never sent me an email to my Gmail account. We can work.
Huh.
Yeah, that's why I just panicked and registered to you, and you sent me okay, my wife's kicking me here.
So you got in through the link I sent you.
Yeah.
Correct.
Mhm.
Good. Okay. Well, that's why
So
we
at
went
the
on
end of
early.
this, let's resolve that, because you wanted me up at 20 after.
That was just to make sure everything was okay. See,
Fine.
we built a few minutes in, and it worked.
You got it.
Good to see you two.
Good to see you.
Russ, can you
So-
make me a co-host?
Yes, I will. And
Okay,
we got a
thank
whole
you.
bunch of participants with us here already, which
Wow,
is great.
wonderful.
And I'm going to try to make Victor the co-host,
Don't
but
give me any-
this list is a moving target. There we go. Got it. You're co-host now, Victor. Does that show you as co-host?
Can't hear. Can you put that sound?
Nope.
No,
Nope,
no,
didn't
I'm
do it
not
yet.
co-host.
I'll try again. Make co-host. There we go. Victor's now the co-host.
Yeah. Yes, I'm co-host now.
Great.
you.
Great to have everybody with us this afternoon.
Oh, that's nice. Must be that guy with the microphone.
I'm gonna mute us.
Because this is Frank.
I am the guy with the microphone. Hi, Joan. Joan and friend. You're muted. And we'll pull this.
We went to Cuba a couple of years ago, so we're very interested in today's program.
Ooh, that's
Good.
great. Joanna Frank will love that. Love to have more people have been to Cuba.
As well.
Okay. Now I got everybody. Hi, Ed and Cassandra and Emily
Hi.
and Tagar. Did I pronounce that right? Love it. I'm big on getting names right. People often don't pronounce my name right. Joan and friend and Norma and Wendy and Susan. Hi, Susan. Barbara, Leslie, and Carolyn. Norma, here's another place you can go.
Yes, I'd like to.
While we're waiting for the last few people to join in, because I don't want to I'll let Frank and Joanne start in a few minutes, but I was doing some trip planning myself this afternoon. Not like I'm really going to go on a trip, but I was doing some research on whether you can find a cheaper place on VRBO, Vacation Rental by Owner, or Booking.com. And well, I got dreaming about going to Italy again, so it's kind of tough right now. But I think the Italians are waiting for us to come back. That much I do know. I'm going to.
Which was cheaper?
Well, I couldn't find the exact same places on both sites, but I found lots of good places on Booking.com, and there's no reason at all to not use Vacation Rental by Owner. But I think for a lot of guest apartments, I'm going to take a guess that Booking.com is more common. So I found a place that I stayed in a couple of years ago, and $500 a week for an apartment in Spello, Italy. That's kind of tough to beat. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to go ahead. Victor, I'm going to ask if you could let people in from the waiting room. I seem to have created a waiting room, which didn't mean to do. So now we've got some people in the waiting room. So if you just let people in the waiting room, there's great presentation this afternoon by Frank and Joanne Kohler. And I'm going to go ahead and start sharing a little bit because this is a great presentation and we want to give all the time to it that we can. We're in Destination Cuba with Frank and Joanne, who I'll get to in just a minute. I'm your guide, Russ Eanes. I'm a writer, walker, and a cyclist, and now a full-time guide with Get Set Up, doing lots of travel classes. And I really appreciate whenever any of you come to me with ideas you have about a class you'd like to share. You don't have to lead the class, just have to come along and share about a trip or an experience like Frank and Joanne are. So please, I'll give you my email address at the end. You can get in touch with me through Get Set Up and hope to see some of you making a presentation. We learn from each other in these classes. Ideally, we can see you and your cameras are on. You can request a recording after class of this class. You email help@getsetup.io. And anyone who's joining by live stream today, and we are live streaming it, the best way to participate is to join us and register for a class. Thank you for everybody who did join us and register for a class today. And lastly, Get Set Up's not to pay to promote any specific products. I'm going to stop my share now, and I'm going to give a little introduction to Frank and Joanne. They are very experienced travelers. Have you always lived in Phoenixville, PA? Okay.
Both
Phoenix,
of us.
outside Philadelphia, Eastern Pennsylvania, great place. They said that they started traveling in the 1990s after a close friend died 3 days after he retired. So good advice. I've known lots of people that said, I'm going to retire and then I'm going to travel, and they didn't make it that far. So they mentioned that in the earlier days, they did like to rent cars when they toured somewhere or traveled somewhere. I did too. But then they would get into the center of town. They couldn't find a place to park. I've had that problem. I would say unless you're going to a place where you really need a car, like if you're out in Scotland or Ireland or somewhere where you want to go visit the countryside, I can see having a car. There's plenty of other places, but if you're going to be in the cities a lot, just ditch the car, take the local transit. It's less stressful, probably cheaper. They've used tour companies 7 or 8 times, especially when it's hard to get around the country. So they give them examples like going to Egypt or Morocco, China, India, Dubai. They've really been around. They always like to travel light. That's another thing I totally agree with you about. They were introduced to Rick Steves, and he cemented the idea of light travel in them. And I believe you two said that you have some Rick Steves travel bags, ones you put on your back. Good for you. You know, if you have to carry it on your back, it makes you think twice about whether or not you really need it. And of course, there's nothing you can't buy in a lot of these places. Yep, they own matching Rick Steves travel bags that are 25 years old. Good for you. They like to work together. Joanne is kind of the trip planner. So she sits and she looks through the guidebooks every night and figures out what they're going to do the next day. And if it's trains or buses, Frank figures out the way to get around. They're not afraid of hostels. Neither am I. We shouldn't be scared of those places. If you want to really see a country, they have stayed in hostels because a lot of places you want to go, there aren't that many options that are reasonable. And it says here, Joanne gets the upper bunk in co-ed facilities. Good for you taking that upper bunk. They never eat in a fast food place except for to use the Wi-Fi. Yep, I like that one too. And they often ask the local, where do you eat? That's the same advice I give. You want to know where to eat? Ask the locals where they go. They prefer to travel off season in April, October, and they always carry a roll of toilet paper. Good idea. I've got some stories about that. Museums are always at the top of their travel plans. I like museums too. We have a lot in common, Frank and Joanne. Of course, we already knew that. They love automobile museums, gardens, cemeteries, any museum in town. Very informative. Sometimes they get on a public bus and just ride its route. And that's one thing I've told people: you want to see London, just get on the local bus, climb up in the top of the double decker out in the front with a bubble of glasses and just watch. They like to take in theater shows, orchestra, or even a bullfight. I guess that's probably just watching it. And they even are up for a camel ride. You've done a camel ride, right? Yeah, they've done a camel ride. Very good. They take in a church or two per town, or a mosque or a synagogue, which tells you a lot about the country. They're really into learning the culture and the history. And a block of cheese and a loaf of bread is always a good lunch. You're right. And if you're Italy, grab a tomato while you're at it. They, I love this, Frank. He loves to keep fake camera photos under 800. That's per trip, right? Not per day. Because I've done 200 a day. That's why I've noted that. Now Joanne takes along her iPhone, which, by the way, you can get really good photos with your phone these days. They don't bring trinkets home or gifts, but they unless it's something like salt from the Dead Sea. I'm also one of those people that brings home rocks, though that has gotten me in trouble. And Joanne's philosophies that were all like jelly beans, different on the outside, but all same on the inside. And Frank's philosophies were all going to die anyway. And before I turn it over to you, and I love your intro, just one little thing to mention. I was with someone yesterday that I hadn't seen in over a year. He is 92, so he's a few years older than I am. And he travels around the country. He hasn't been out of the country in years. I asked him what he did last year. He lives in a retirement home near me. Great person, Art Borden, 92 years old. And he said last year he traveled. He got in his car and he drove to Florida. He drove to California. He drove to Texas because he's a big family and they're all spread out. He said, you know what? If I wait a year, I might not be alive. And if I get this and I die, what have I lost? So, I mean, I'm not a cavalier attitude toward COVID, but he was 92. And he said, I was always safe and I was always careful. And I love that philosophy. You know, he said, I may not have another year. So he went and did it. So Frank and Joanne, hopefully you can share your screen with me, with us, and we'll go ahead and give it a try. And I'm going to turn it over to you. And what I'm going to ask everyone here to do today, I got two questions. One question at the beginning. Anybody else here besides Joan been to Cuba? Raise your hand. Just hold it up. Oh, wow, Ed. And I don't think you're Ed. But or raise a virtual hand. Okay, so we got some people who've been here to Cuba. Great. I'm going to ask that you. I'm going to request that you put your questions in the chat so we can let Frank and Joanne get through the presentation. Then we'll have time for Q&A. So Frank and Joanne, go ahead and take it.
Okay. Now, I hope everyone can hear me.
We can hear you well.
Wonderful. Okay. First thing I thought we'd start with is the flag. And the triangle on the flag represents liberty, equality, and fraternity.
Have you done a screen share yet?
Oh,
Yes,
uh-oh.
I have.
Screen share. Hold on. Hold on.
Can you hear us?
Oh, we can hear you well. I'm just looking for your screen.
I clicked, I had the Zoom up and I did the share and it went immediately. Let me make sure.
So Victor, should we make them co-hosts?
I think yes, you can make them co-host.
Okay.
Otherwise, we have also allowed the participant to share screen. But if it is
Yeah.
not sharing, so you can make them co-host.
I did allow them to share screen, but I'm going to make you guys co-hosts.
All right.
And now try sharing screen.
All right.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything from Zoom, sir.
Okay.
All
So
right.
do you have Zoom up on your screen?
I have,
There it is.
okay. Now
Go down to share.
There you go.
Here we go.
Okay.
Are we okay
The
now?
problem is I am not looking at are you looking at my Cuba?
Yep, we got Cuba now.
Okay,
All
all right, we're doing it backwards, but here we go. And my wife is going to take the lead.
And if you do a full, there you go. We got it. Now it's
Got it.
working. Go ahead,
Okay.
Joanne.
All righty. All right. The triangle on the flag represents liberty, equality, and fraternity. And anyone from Texas might recognize the star, the white star. And the Cubans feel that that lights the way to freedom. The red represents the blood that was shed for independence. When we went to Cuba, it was quite an experience. I went because one of my friends had gone, about 10 years ago when it had first opened up. And she went with the group and she just kept talking about how wonderful it was. So when the opportunity came, Frank and I decided we were going to go. And we also went with a tour group, which was called S'more Tours. And when we went, we were lucky enough to stay in private residences and also to eat in paladars, which were the privately owned restaurants. So the first one that we'll see, I think, is the Divino restaurant, which was privately owned. It was quite lovely. When we went there, there was a lush garden all around. And the interesting thing was that we had a little tour with one of the owners of the restaurant, and she talked about all the botanical cultivation that they had there. They also would have occasionally birds in cages as you looked around. But the nice thing about this restaurant was that they were very interested in the senior citizens of the community. So this was kind of like a meeting house where they would come and they would either watch television or they would play games and socialize with each other. And the women who were there also often would make arts and crafts and things to sell. So it actually supported their ability to make a little bit of extra money. One of the places we stayed was a casa particular. And one of the reasons you might want to pack light is notice the number of steps that we had to go up. This was the casa particulars are all very legal, not illegal, but they're very nice to stay in because it's less expensive than other, like the larger hotels. They often offer breakfast like an Airbnb or just like a regular B&B. They are run by private citizens, and it gives you an opportunity to interact with the people who are the Cuban people. However, many of them don't speak English, so a little bit of Spanish helps. I have no Spanish, but I think a lot of hand signals went a long way. They do collect your passport, and they have to pay taxes to the government. The accommodations are very rudimentary, but before the embargo really came down during the last administration, they had invested a lot of money because it had been lifted for a while and people were able to come into Cuba. So these people have invested a lot of money into their little facilities. But as I said, they're very rudimentary, beautifully painted. This was Roberto. He was our host for the day and just a lovely, lovely gentleman. This is where we had our breakfast in a little breakfast nook, and all kinds of fresh vegetables and delicious juices, all the different kinds of juices they would have. They really, scrambled eggs, which was interesting. That's the only way we had an egg was scrambled. And I'm sure we ate much better than the Cubans did, because they have some difficulty in the ability to have enough food for themselves. One of the reasons was because of the embargo. So the places that we stayed were really interesting, and I would recommend that if you go to Cuba, that you not stay in a large hotel. If you're able to stay, it's a good way to stay. We did a lot of sightseeing along the way, and of course, one of the famous places to visit was Ernest Hemingway's house. And it was about 20 miles outside of town. And notice the style of it. It's kind of like a nice Spanish colonial style. And as you walk up the steps, and we were not allowed to go into the house. You could only view it from the outside. So one of the young ladies took her camera and took pictures. Notice that there's tile floors and high ceilings along that area. Hemingway lived a very unpretentious life when he lived there. This was his primary residence until he moved out in 1960. And Frank, do you want to talk about his boat?
Apparently, the guy was quite a fisherman. I have read a lot about that. And of course, this boat hasn't been in the water for a long time, but it's part of the estate there. And I really admire anybody because I've never been in to sea in anything bigger than 10 feet in length. This is, Joanne?
This was the Playa de Francesco, and we visited 4 of the major plazas in Cuba. This was actually an old church at one time, and notice the tower off to the right. It was at one time the highest point in Cuba. And this was the area where the ships from Spain would come in with their goods and they would trade in this particular area. The Spanish colonial style was very, very important. This is no longer a church, but is now a concert hall and has been not a church for many, many years.
The gentleman on the left is the Cuban guide that we met there. He was a school teacher, college professor, and of course, this was paying much better when he was doing tours. The lady on the right with the dark hair was an American from Texas, and she was leading us around, getting us to the appropriate places. I'm sorry to say, I don't know who the gentleman in the middle is, but you can see people have been rubbing his beard and his hands and his shoulder, and I can only guess it's for good luck. Everywhere you go, there's somebody with an imaginative way of making money. And this gentleman, by the way, that dog is alive. I don't know how it stays up there, but he followed me for about 2 blocks, and I'm sure I found some coins in my pocket to pay him. This was just a couple of young ladies that were from Canada, and they kept looking at this thing on the wall, and I told them it was a mailbox. And they kind of said, well, okay, I believe you. And I said, look, just see if there's some mail in there. Well, she was mocking me with her hands. This is one of the plazas that we visited.
This is Plaza Vea, and it has a lot of modern architecture there, but notice the style of the houses as you look around. They are many different styles. They're painted this beautiful beautiful pastel colors. And where the balconies are, this was where the people in the 18th century and early 19th century would sit in their balconies and watch below in the plaza. They would have bullfights there. They would have festivals, and they would just enjoy that. But the balconies and the colors were very, very beautiful in certain areas. Now you're going to see some other areas later on that are not quite as colorful. This was a stock exchange, which was a very interesting building. One of the things that Cuba is noted for is the architecture. So when you look at the pictures, you can see the different styles of architecture everywhere around.
Standard street scene. You look about, there are not a lot of Americans and hardly any Europeans. It is always, this is about the average amount of foot traffic throughout the main town. Joanne's going to talk about the street.
This is actually a wooden street, and this plaza, you notice the large pillars along the back. This was the Plaza de Arms. It's the oldest plaza from what I understand. Of course, sometimes they all say they're the oldest plaza, so you're never quite sure. But they said this was the oldest plaza, and the reason they had the wood there was because the people housed in the building right behind it were the generals. And there were about 50 to 65 generals who lived and had their offices in there. And sometimes their counterparts of their wives were there also, but they did not want to have the sound of the horses interfering with them. So they created these wooden streets. So this is a replication of one of the wooden streets that was there.
It would just be very much like any cement brick, but it is made out of hard wood. It's about 4 inches thick. And of course, if you run a carriage or a horse across there, you don't get the clip clop or the noise from the carriage. This is the main building that is behind that area.
And now it's a city museum. You can see how enormous it was, and you can understand how that many people could have been accommodated in there. And around there is a beautiful square filled with the royal palm, which is the significant tree in Cuba. Now this is a city museum.
Murals everywhere. Some people refer to some of them as graffiti, and it's probably called graffiti because it's probably some artist has done it on somebody else's wall, so they may call it graffiti, but this is not unusual for something this extensive. It almost looks as if it had to be managed by some kind of governmental agency. This is what I call graffiti, and it is absolutely gorgeous. There is very little of what we call in Philadelphia graffiti.
This particular building is one of the most photographed buildings in Cuba, and it's the Plaza de Cathedral. It's named after Christopher Columbus, who was the patron saint of Cuba. And the stone there was cut from coral from the Gulf of Mexico and brought in. One of the things that I read was someone said that this was like music set in stone. And I thought it was just a beautiful phrase to use for that. And it is said to be the most photographed building in the plaza and in the plazas.
Now, on the right, of course, you see what we would commonly here in the States call graffiti. But actually, I think that there are a lot of friendly people who have come and just put their name on there as if I was here. Street scene is not unusual, and the lady and the gentleman dressed that way likely would be available to be a guide for you for the afternoon for pay.
And three popes have actually visited that cathedral, Benedict, John, and Francis, the three popes. Very Catholic country. Classic
transportation. You never know what you're going to see. And as a matter of fact, I'm sure everybody's waiting to see the cars.
Cuba imports about 80% of its food, and it is rationed. So people all have a designated amount of rations that they receive, and they are very good at bartering, at exchanging, at making the best of what they have with the least that they have. And it's very, very, so because of the oil embargo and the collapse of the Soviet Union, some of their trading partners have been dislocated and discombobulated. So they have subsidized rations to help them out.
A few of us walking through the common area. The buildings, some of them are air conditioned, most of them don't need them because the building is so massive. It is self-cooling. Entrepreneurs everywhere setting up food. Of course, the building in the background is a little downtrodden and there is some graffiti, but we're probably 2 or 3 streets off of the main street. Carriage rides, of course, are always available.
This was quite an interesting place. The man who is considered to be the most notable hairdresser in Cuba opened this shop. Not only do people come and sit in the antique chairs amongst his enormous collection, which is actually a kind of a museum, he also has started a school where he teaches young people, especially underprivileged youngsters, to cut hair. So they go out and they often work in cruise ships and other places. And it's a really interesting way that he has started this business. And he had a interview with Obama when President Obama was in Cuba, and he has made a lot of money. So his philosophy is, which he repeated to Obama, when they were talking about entrepreneurship, he said, I can't be a millionaire in my business while watching those around me unable to cover their basic needs. Ever since I started my salon, I dreamt of creating a cultural project which would transcend my business. And he has also worked with a gentleman whose name is Mr. Leal, who is a historian, and they have taken one of the worst streets in Cuba and over the past, I guess, 6 to 10 years, transformed it. And the arts have just boomerang and just continue to boomerang. So you can see this is a wonderful sculpture right at the end of that particular area. And they call it arte corte, cutting art, which is very appropriate for a hairdresser.
Kind of an establishment along the way, and you can tell that it's probably primarily drinks, but you can get food almost anywhere.
And notice the drinks: mojitos, daiquiris, pina colada, raw Collins, all these wonderful things made with rum. Cuba is very well noted for its architecture, for its beaches, for its rum, for its cigars, and for its people.
And it's beautiful women, but my wife said I'm not allowed to talk about that. Street art again. I would love to be able to interpret it, but seeing the scissors and the comb there, I could assume it had something to do with what Joanne was just talking about. This is one of the establishments we went, and yes, half of that is American money, and there's French francs, South American money. It was really clever, and we went here and enjoyed our lunch. And as a matter of fact, we left a little bit of us there. There's Phoenixville, PA. Joanne Kohler, today is my birthday. Of course, she didn't tell me how many years, but 1942, you guys can figure it out.
This is one of the meals that we had at one of the restaurants, and we were fed abundantly. They had all kinds of pork and shredded pork. We ate a lot of beans, a lot of rice, a lot of beans and rice mixed together. We ate a lot of fresh fruit. And we always, I'm sure, ate much better than the Cubans did. In fact, after a while, we tried to order only one meal because we knew that the food was quite often not plentiful for the regular Cubans.
One of the oldest fortresses in Cuba has been standing there for several hundred years.
This gentleman who created this particular area is often called the Gaudi of Cuba, and he is one of the most celebrated artists in Cuba. His name is Jose Fuster, and he was trained at the Escuela Nacional de Instructors of Art in Cuba, in Havana. And this is located on the outskirts of Cuba. And it's basically what happened to where the gentleman was cutting hair, what happened in his community. People around here started to enjoy his work. He used all reclaimed material, all kinds of things that were just available because they make the most of what they have. And he started doing this kind of ceramic work. It blossomed out into the community, and now there are about 80 different little establishments that have continued to allow him to come into the house and to decorate and to use his creative talent. And it has spilled out into the area where other people are starting to do it also. So this was kind of the entrance. It's 3 stories. You can stand on the art, you can touch the art, you can feel the art. There was only one place that you were not allowed to take photographs, and that was in the little studio in the back. So it's really a fantastic place to see. And if those of you who have been to Spain might really, and see Gaudi's work, might, be able to relate to that.
Viva Cuba. And I suspect when some of us here today will go back to Cuba, hopefully in the next year or two, we'll likely see that art continuation. This is the next door neighbors.
This was a wonderful little school for children. It was called the Beehive. It's a children's theater group, and it is considered to be a place where children don't audition. All children are welcome. Some of the plays that they put on are bilingual. Parents of all parents create all the costumes and the set designs for all the kids. It's an artistic community project, and the parents really do have to sacrifice to send their children to this particular school. The gentleman who's in charge is over there on the right-hand side is Carlos Tim Cremada. And this particular school includes all children. It doesn't matter if they have any kinds of handicaps, motor disabilities, visual or hearing disabilities. They work with socially disadvantaged boys and girls. They've actually done 3 national tours, one in Spain, one in Japan, and one in Venezuela. And I think later on at the end of the trip, I think Frank will play a little clip of these kids.
All the
They were
people
so
who
talented.
work with these youngsters are volunteers. You'll see the different uniforms. And many of these kids, after they go to school all day, which probably ends at 1 or 2 in the afternoon, will ride a bus for quite a while to get to this school. It's very uplifting.
The National Capitol building looks like our Capitol, but it really isn't. It was completed before ours was completed. It's a neoclassical, and a little bit of Art Nouveau is right next door. That is
The opera.
the opera. And there's the cars. Frankie, tell about
All
the
right.
cars.
My wife really wanted to tell you all about the cars, but I begged her to let me do that. The cars are certainly a highlight, and I would say they are almost exclusively used for the tourist area. And I was amazed. I can't remember driving some of these, but I know I did. Truth be told, the only thing about these is the outer shell is probably original. I had the opportunity to look under the hood of several of them, and they had Russian motors. The brakes and the wheels, etc., may have come from a German car. They're very intuitive down there and are able to keep these running. I actually looked under the hood of one of the automobiles, and I saw something familiar, and there was a motor in one of them, and it said Oster, as in Osterizer, just like you used to have in your home. How they adapted that was beyond me. This is the hangout, La Flora, for Joanne?
Hemingway.
Mr. Hemingway,
Mr.
yes,
Hemingway.
yes.
And actually a bronze statue on the inside at the end of the bar. And of course, this is where he had all his daiquiris. Art Nouveau, Art Deco, the Baroque, all the different architecture is so extremely important in Havana. It's one of the things that they are really noted for. And this was the old Bacardi building, which was nationalized by Fidel Castro.
This previously was probably a warehouse. I know it was along the wharf, and you can see that there are probably just in sight 8 or 10 home operated items. Probably as many as 200 of the Cubans had operations here.
I think this goes way back to the 18th century, and it's a place where the Cubans will display their wares. Cuba was not really known for handcrafts and things like that, but I think due to the embargo, they started to use whatever was available, and they have created some interesting things that are for sale. Upstairs, there's also an art studio. They have all different kinds of programs in here, and this sits right on the wharf. It was once the depository for the ships when they came in.
And all that walking, my wife let me go out for lunch. I have to eat at 12 o'clock or I become very growly. Dinner again, chicken, I think, or pork.
It was chicken there, I think. And then plantains and all kinds of fresh fruit, rice of every kind all the time. This was fun. This was a fusion of the African culture, their folk culture, and Catholicism. It is another kind of a street area. It's about 3 blocks long, where the gentleman who is a self-taught artist started this. It's very eclectic. It's very interesting. The gentleman who started it was Salvador Gonzalez Escalona. And it's a mixture of surrealism, cubism, abstractism, and it's funky and it's fun. And on Sunday afternoons, the people gather there, and they have all kinds of things for children. They have all kinds of dances. So look as you look around here. It's really a great place. They use everything you can possibly imagine. And that was some of Salvador's work. It's psychedelic, old bathtubs. What's that thing up the side?
That is part of a cement mixer, which they detached from its frame, painted it up, and by God, that was a highlight. But they are bathtubs. I had to go knock on it to make sure.
And this neighborhood once had a very sketchy, dangerous reputation. So once the artists start incorporating their love of art into the different communities, it just spills out everywhere. And remember, they're working with what they have, which is very little in many instances.
Cemeteries, Joanne, this is one of the largest cemeteries in Cuba.
60 city blocks, and started in 1866 by royal decree. Just 60 blocks long, I think it is. Over how many? Over 10 acres and 1 million graves there.
Hotel International, when the Americans were still going down there regularly in the 50s and 60s, everybody from Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra, it was the place to go. And this hotel was built by Americans for Americans.
And no Cubans were allowed to stay there. Now, if you look at the top, go back 1 minute. Can you go back? If you look at the top, you can almost see the chess pieces along there. It's kind of a mismatch of a lot of different styles in that particular place. And chess is a very, very important factor in Havana.
Right now, almost exclusively with Cuban help and Cuban people coming to stay there. Americans are few and far between. At one point in time, there were embankments, part of a fort. They're still maintaining that. Who knows what's going to happen down there.
This was it was served as Fidel's headquarters during the aerial defense during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
This is an interesting school also, and I hope to show you something about it a little bit later. But the folks there are really dedicated in their love of the arts, the dance, and the art.
These girls were so talented. They just drummed on those chairs. They danced. They did every kind of dance you could possibly imagine.
This is Jose Marti monument. Jose Marti in the 1890s was declared a national hero. He was, in fact, a poet. He was a philosopher and a professor, and was primarily responsible for the ability to separate from Spain and develop the Cuban style.
So this is now one of the largest squares in the world, actually.
Cuba, Fidel, everywhere. You can't turn a corner without it.
He made one of his most of his speeches there.
This gentleman had a car that we were able to ride in, and you could see that that cigar, well, by the way, there were two cigars. He had one and he gave me one, and we lit them up, and everybody piled into this car. And this is my wife on the left-hand side in her excitement with her camera. But the reason she's getting ready to take pictures is the rest of our friends are in the car adjacent us, and that guy decided to pass us going down the highway. This is the inside of that car. And as I said, a lot of modifications there. That radio is not all that old. We got passed on the other side too by other friends. We're headed out into the country, and we're headed for the notorious Bay of Pigs. This is a reference to the prisoners that were captured at that point in time. Give you a little background. April 17, 1961, 1,400 Cuban exiles, people that left when Castro came in, most of them from the South here in the United States or from Florida. 1,400 of them decided that they were going to invade. The United States actually sent aircraft in there and bombed the airports for a couple of days. They weren't terribly effective. And guess what? Our CIA was behind all of the planning for this endeavor. This is such a shame that this is such a beautiful place, And one of the reasons it's beautiful is there's hundreds of species of coral, hundreds of species of sponges there. And guess what? The CIA did not know that it was only about 4 feet deep. And as they brought the boats in with all the exiles, the bottom scraped and tipped. There were over 400 of those men were killed, including 4 US military attachés who were part of the invasion. The United States didn't acknowledge it, that they had anything to do with this until the 1960s.
Now it's used for snorkeling. There are about 3,500 miles of beaches in Cuba. Cuba is the largest island in that particular area. And it's just glorious. The color of the water is that turquoise blue. And you can just see the coral down. It looks straight down. Just beautiful.
Now we're off just about 6 miles from there. But of course, there's always, when there's leftover munitions or equipment from any military affair. This is the Giron Museum, and of course we'll have all kinds of information about the failed attempt. This is all Russian-built equipment because the Russians were supporting them at the time. Again,
it was from the Cuban perspective also.
Precisely. Now, I might just say, as we were going back, I guess, to go to lunch or something, our bus stopped. There was a bus about 12, 14 people on, and I noticed ahead, and I thought that someone had spilled paint or something on the other side of the road, that wavy yellow thing that you see there. Well, what we didn't realize was that this gentleman was waiting because this yellow strip is rice. They had taken tons of rice, they brought them in bags, and they spread it out, and they're drying it. So cars go one direction, then they wait and they go the other direction. Here is the consummation of that. And all of these bags were at one time scooped up by this gentleman and put into the bags. I tell you what, my wife's going to tell you about rice.
Wash your rice.
Wash your rice. Your mother always said, wash your rice. I see some heads nodding. You better believe it.
One of the reasons that they do this is because of the lack of fuel, because oil is so expensive, gas
Right.
is so expensive there. There's often lines while they're waiting for
Right.
oil and gas.
And this is a sign, of course, showing the Cuban people are still angry at Uncle Sam. And every word you see, if it's not Fidel, it's Che Rivera or anti-American.
But they're not angry with Americans that we understood when we were there. They were all very sociable. The Cuban people were all very sociable to us. So the political situation is one thing, but people to people is something else.
This is a bus stop for the Cuban people. And if you are driving through Cuba and you have a bus and you only have 12 seats in there and only 8 of them are filled, you are required to stop and to pick up and take the passengers along with you.
If you're a government vehicle.
That's right. The countryside, the sea, everything is just spectacular. Joanne?
The fruit is fantastic. You name it, they have it. I don't know what I ate, but they were giving us samples and it was really delicious. And there are these little stands as you're driving along. So our bus driver would stop and we, have something. And we always left something. We took a lot of things with us, even though we packed light. And when we really understood how deprived the Cuban people were of everything, what we left, if we had pens, if we had papers, whatever we had, we would leave at these spots. Do you have a question, Russ? We can't hear.
Russ, we cannot hear you. You're muted.
Thank you.
All right, yeah.
I was going to say, to give us some minutes for some time for Q&A, do you want to skip and close with that video of the kids doing the percussion?
That would be great. That would
Well,
be wonderful.
I would prefer the other one where they were singing. Can
The-
you do that?
the
I'll let you choose.
Well, we did the
Joanne.
percussion the last time, so let's do the children.
Do the
this
other one
time.
this time. Good.
Okay, that's
Would
great.
you please?
Okay, good.
Go ahead.
Oh, right. I have to do that. Forgot about it.
You have a job.
Let me pull that one up for you.
Okay.
You want me to stop share?
Yes. Why don't you do a stop share?
Okay.
And I will find the video of, let's see. Hang on. No, this is the other musicians, isn't it?
Yeah, the children singing.
It doesn't matter, whichever one you can get first.
Yeah, I have it here, but you want me to
Well,
share?
I'm going to do this one because I couldn't find one of the children singing. So let me do this one.
Okay, this was
Okay.
great too.
So let me do a quick screen share. Oh.
Oh, that's yeah.
One sec. Let me get. I want to get a good quality.
Three, full class.
Oh, this was.
Marvelous.
That was great. I really appreciate what you shared. Boy, there's a lot of notes I took on it. I especially love your emphasis on art. That was really good. I love the public art, street art. I call graffiti public art. But to give us our folks that are here a few more minutes to ask you questions, there were several put in the chat, and I want to make sure we got to those. Wendy asked, how many days were you in Cuba?
Only 7, not long
7.
enough. Mhm.
Okay. And was this considered a cultural tour?
Well, people to people was no longer valid to use. So this was the way we got in. We were grandfathered in because of the change in administrations. We were grandfathered in, and it was considered to be in support of the Cuban people. Now, when my girlfriend went, like many years ago, I think it was the people to people tour, but she went with one of the local public radio stations.
The tour company was Smart Tours. I'll put that name in the notes that come out afterward.
Right.
Questions?
Can
Go
you
ahead,
still can you still travel to Cuba? Can
As far,
Americans still travel to Cuba?
as far as I know, you can if you go with the group. I don't know.
Yeah, you have to be a certified group travel. I know it used to be, but I didn't know if it was still ongoing.
What if it-
Was an American allowed to go to Guantanamo?
No,
No,
that would be military.
That's military.
Remember, it's an
I
American.
recognize it's military, but we are Americans. Maybe you can talk to your congressperson and get a special trip into Guantanamo,
I'm
which
not
I think
sure.
they should turn into Disneyland.
I'm not so sure I would want to go there under any circumstance for any reason. You may
Why?
not come back out.
Oh, really?
What can I say?
That's scary thought.
No, I had no desire to visit Guantanamo at all.
I'm just the type that like to go and see what's going on all over the place.
Sure.
And in 7 days, and we were with the tour group, and I think the nice thing about this particular group that we went with was that the cultural activities and seeing how committed the people of Cuba were to education. The literacy rate is really high because, of course, it's supported by the government. everyone gets, health access and schooling, but the literacy rate is extremely high. All the people we talked to were really well educated and really, were very pleasant. So that was very important to us. And I think that was one of the focuses, and that's one of the reasons that you can travel if you are doing a kind of a cultural thing. I think that might be one way you can get around Americans going. Now, the cruise ships in the last administration were verboten. They were not allowed to go in. So I don't know how it's going to, I don't know if it's going to change or not now or what. But the embargo has certainly had a significant effect on the Cuban people. We left everything we could there when we left.
Periodically, my wife would take a necklace off and give it to a child. She's left different items of clothing with people. We were almost sure we could see their eyes just light up. A new dress, skirt, sneakers.
And we tipped as much as we could to everyone, and we supported each of the schools and things that we went to. We always donated a certain amount of money to each of those. They even had some senior groups that we went to, and they were fascinating. These ladies and these gentlemen taught us some of the dances, and the one woman taught us the story of the fan, and they talked about how a fan was such an important cultural part of the Spanish heritage. And she talked about if you had your fan opened with the decorative part facing a gentleman, that meant, oh, I like you. If you turned it the other way, it was, no, I don't like you. And if you waved it really, 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 really fast, it meant, I really like you. And if it was slowly, it was like, get away. And then if you closed it and put it close to your heart, it was, I love you. And this one woman was married for 60 some years, and she was showing us how, she showed to her husband. And then if you took the fan and tapped it against your arm, it was, get away. So it was really interesting. Yes, Ross, do you have a question?
No, I know that's great. I appreciate it. That's a great story. There was a question. Someone's asked, did you have to stay with your group, and could you go out on your own? That's a good question.
We went out on our own.
We did.
We went out on our own. We had free time, like in the evenings, a couple times in the afternoon, and we could go out on our own everywhere.
There were no minders with us. As a matter of fact, our tour guide only came out and toured us for 2 or 3 hours or 4 hours, and then he went back home with his family, and we could go anywhere, do anything. We were never challenged.
How was the language barrier? Was it hard to speak to them and for them to speak to us?
Yeah, he's asking about the language barrier.
Oh, yeah, I speak no Spanish, so that was difficult. But, sign language and a smile goes a long way, and people are open. Some people spoke, many people spoke English. Some people didn't, when you were out to the country, there weren't a lot, but sign language and, just, being pleasant to people, you can usually get across your whatever you wanted.
Okay.
We got maybe one more question. This has been great.
Someone else went to Cuba. Who else went to Cuba?
Yes.
Joan? Was it Joan that went?
A couple people did.
Uh-huh.
Joan, you're muted, Joan.
Muted.
Yes, Christina and I went to Cuba together.
Uh-huh. When?
When was
It was when you could still take a ship. It was during the Obama administration.
Uh-huh.
That's when they were trying to open things up down there, but it subsequently closed. Right now, the support for Cuba is from Venezuela, China, Canada, and Brazil. It's still, of course, a very communistic country. Fidel is dead. Raul Castro has just retired, and I don't think that they're expecting any changes down there. I know that because of all the Cuban exiles in Florida, I don't think our Congress or our president is going to touch any possibility of opening Cuba. If you want to go to Venezuela, you can fly to Cuba. You can go anywhere, but not out of the United States and fly directly.
you could probably fly from Canada, if you can get to Canada. So right now, that's a moot
close.
point.
Canada.
Mexico.
Mexico.
Europeans are all there.
Does Cuba have anything to export?
Um,
Prescription medications.
rice.
Cigars.
Doctors.
That's okay. That's right. Cigars. But what about their fruits?
I don't know what they export, to tell you the truth. I
Yeah.
don't know. I know they import about 80% of their food.
Yeah,
I don't know what their
80%
exports
of their
are.
food is imported there. And one of the reasons they're so poor is there was a time when Russia was involved and was providing them with a lot of cash and support. But once they bailed, the country just went downhill. There are two seasons, 2 crops a year of rice. So there's a lot of rice.
Okay, that's right.
Nickel is one of the elements that they can export. The problem is, because of the embargo, if you are trading with Cuba, you can't, there are a lot of rules and regulations, which I think prohibits them from exporting a lot of things. So they're really in a bind. And I don't know what has happened now with COVID, how they are, because they were really hurting, after when Obama went, and then, things started opening up, and then it came down again, like with a bang. All these people who invested anything that they had, they really were up the creek. And with what's the embargo been for 60 years? No, it's been a long time. But it is still, it's a communist country. I mean, it is a communist country, and there are political things that are going on, which are way over my head. But just looking at it as an interaction with the Cuban people, it was just delightful, wonderful, eye-opening, and really soul-searching, if I could say that.
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear more. We all would love to hear more. Unfortunately, our hour is up, and you were great. Let's give everyone an applause. I just think Frank and Joanne did. We feel your passion. We feel your love and what you learned. Thank you so much. That's
we
what
enjoyed doing it. We really do.
You need to be tour guides.
There you go.
That's one of my occupations during my life.
There you go. I will say one last thing. I think Cuba's main export used to be sugar. So that's what it was back in the day.
And rum.
And rum. Yep. And they're related, sugar and rum.
Yeah, sugar, rum, but then it was nationalized by Fidel. So then the Bacardi is that there's a whole political thing going in there. That's right. Thank you. I forgot about that.
Well, this was excellent. And I want to thank all of you for coming. There's one more class this evening if you want to come in here, but when we can travel where, I'll try to give you the latest updates on travel news around the world, because things are changing by the day, by the hour. So 7:30 Eastern time. I hope to see some of you that are wondering about that in another class. And again, thanks, Frank and Joanne. An excellent presentation. And I hope to get to Cuba someday myself.
Okay. I hope
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
We really
Have a great
enjoyed.
day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.